Solo runs are common in games like Pokemon that let you structure your party with only a single mon, but Fire Emblem makes this a pain with things like forced deployments and units joining your army mid-battle. Despite knowing how all this would astronomically increase my anxiety levels, I decided to try and find out if my favorite character Sylvain, our resident crest hater and skirt chaser, can clear the entirety of 3 houses, Academy phase, in Maddening mode by himself. These are the rules I set for this solo run. New Game Plus is allowed. I mean, this is Maddening mode. It's already hard enough with a full army, but with a single unit, we need to unlock those skill levels. Only Sylvain can enter combat with enemy units. Green ally units are obviously exempt from this rule. They'll do whatever the AI wants them to. I will allow the use of dancers for maps where they can be safely deployed. For healing, I will get the full use of 1 healing item per map. For maps where victory conditions depend on the survival of green ally units, I'll allow 1 other character other than Sylvain to use healing skills on those units. DLC items will be allowed. Yes, this run is pay to win. With all that out of the way, let's get to the run. After skipping the prologue, since we still don't have access to the students at that point, the first thing we do is get all the DLC stat boosters and unlock all of Sylvain's skills and class masteries from previous files. When I play Fire Emblem, I like to stick with the canon classes, so I always just made my Sylvain a Dark Knight since that's what the game seems to be pushing him to be. But as a result of this, while his lance and reason and writing skills were super high, everything else was pretty low level. Other than his axe skill anyway, since after mastering Dark Knight I tried to make him into a Great Knight, but I couldn't even start raising his army skill because I was already at the end of the game. Maybe I'll finally get Great Knight Sylvain in this run. I also raised Dimitri's writing skill to unlock the Movement +1 ability, which is going to be really important since he's a forcibly deployed unit for quite a few chapters, and we need all the movement we can get on him so he can run away from enemies. Getting this on Byleth would be way better since they're a forced deployment for every single chapter, but I never ever worked on their writing in my previous playthroughs. So unlocking that skill for them is going to take a long time. Either way, there's nothing else to say for this segment, since we technically only get 1 free exploration day with a single activity point, so we can just go straight into the first month's battle. For the Mach battle, I assigned Felix as adjutant because I thought I'd use him as my dancer for the run, but that doesn't end up happening as you'll see later in the run. Starting the battle, the first thing I do is move Sylvain into the trees for those avoid buffs and let the enemies come to him. For this part of the map, dispatching Lorenz, Ignatz, and Dorothea is pretty simple, so here's the compilation for that part. As we approach the remaining golden deer, I position Sylvain only in range of Hilda to draw her out of the forest, and wait for her to come to him first. Claude also moves out too, and he doesn't even have close counter at this point, so dealing with him first is a no-brainer. After that, dealing with Hilda isn't much of a problem since she keeps missing, so Sylvain was still at full health. I decide to capitalize on that and move him to the forest again to hopefully keep him as healthy as possible. He kills her next turn when she attacks thanks to the high-level magic he has access to. After Hilda, I move Sylvain just out of Hanneman's attack reach, which is also just enough for Sylvain to get the jump on him in the next turn. Sylvain thankfully has access to the Swift Strike's combat arts, which allows him to hit twice consecutively before the enemy can hit back, so Sylvain is still perfectly healthy at this point of the map. Unfortunately, after getting rid of the golden deer, the black eagles start moving out. It's not so bad at first because they all move west towards Sylvain, but I wanted to take them on one at a time, and after I targeted Ferdinand von Aegir first, Hubert and Edelgard start moving south towards where Byleth and Dimitri are. After I moved the both of them up closer to Sylvain, while Edelgard went back to moving north, Hubert continued closing in from the south, so I had to get Byleth and Dimitri into playing Ring Around the Rosie with him, while Sylvain went on to deal with Edelgard. Thankfully, Sylvain was able to deal with Edelgard easily in one turn, so I was able to get him to Hubert before Hubert could get the jump on Dimitri or Byleth. After all that excitement, dealing with Manuela is very simple since she's a static unit and slow, so Sylvain just doubles her and deals with her in one turn to close out the battle. On to Chapter 2, we get our first round of support conversations, which is Sylvain and Felix, predictably, and Sylvain and Ashe. Now is a good time to say that one of my goals for this solo run is to get all of Sylvain's support conversations, or at least for all the characters I recruit. I'll try to keep recruitments to a minimum since recruiting students from other houses removes them as enemies from future chapters, making the run easier. Also, even if we do recruit them, they just go straight into the bench anyway, so there's no meaning in that. I will only get characters required for certain paralogs with good rewards like Lorenz for his relic, or characters that share a paralogue after the time skip, like Casper with Mercedes. Now is also a good time to mention that another one of my goals is to clear all the paralogs of the students in the Blue Lions, but reality wasn't so kind for that one, as you'll see later on. We then get everyone started on their path to the earliest flying class they can get so they can more easily get out of enemy range for forced deployment maps. Or at least everyone other than Felix, because I thought I would use him as a dancer, but by not investing in his flying, I'm pretty sure I screwed myself over for the first chapter after the time skip. But that's a problem for future me. Anyway, we move on to this month's mission, making Sylvain beat up some bandits. There's not much to cover here since it's an easy map for Sylvain, who has a pretty decent defense stat early game where there are no magical enemies. Yet. I mostly just take advantage of the grassy tiles and let the enemies come to him so he potentially avoids some hits, especially from axes that hit harder but are less accurate. When the archers moved out, I tended to prioritize them since they have increased attack range for their class ability and they didn't have close counter to hit us back. I just killed as many of the enemy units as possible to farm experience before targeting the boss to end the map. We do have a little race against time at the end with the archer trying to reach Byleth and Dimitri at the bottom of the map, but as usual, Swift Strike saves the day when Sylvain can't double the enemies naturally. Another job well done for Sylvain. For the month of Chapter 3, there's a lot of chances for battles, so I grinded a lot of levels on characters with early paralogs to get them closer to reclassing to flyers. As a result, we unlocked a lot of supports for Sylvain. C support with Dedue, B with Felix, and C with Ingrid in the first free day grinding battles. Then maxed his support with Dedue at B, got C support with Byleth, and B with Ingrid on the second day. Also, incidentally, this is what Sylvain's stats looked like at level 10 during this run. For comparison, this is what a Sylvain following his usual soldier class would look like at the same level. My Sylvain here is doing great everywhere but in dexterity and luck. So far he's been really sabotaging his chances of landing crits, and I kid you not, at this point in the run he hadn't landed a single crit in any battles. His speed's been growing at a really nice rate though, especially since I've been avoiding leveling him up in classes that hinder his base speed growth of 50%, which is his highest base growth after HP at 55. If his speed continues growing like this, he'll probably be able to consistently double axe and lance enemies, and maybe avoid being doubled by speedy sword units. Other than unlocking Dimitri's C support, nothing else happens this month, so we can jump straight into this month's battle. It's a fog of war map, which is super annoying, especially for a solo run where we have to keep certain units out of enemy range. I allowed myself the use of torches with Byleth too for this map so I could move them out of the way more easily. Either way, this map is also really easy for Sylvain. It's just really annoying with the lack of visibility, but at least we just have to worry about dealing with the top of the map since Catherine's got the bottom half. I had to do a soft reset with Divine Pulse because I ended up putting Byleth into enemy range, but at least it's a really simple fix. We just continue onward, letting Sylvain deal with most of the enemies while Catherine deals with some of them when she can actually hit them. We eventually reach the Dark Mage, who's the condition for getting rid of the fog and revealing the boss of the map. After we deal with him, we get a cool Catherine cutscene that makes her look way cooler than what she's actually been doing the entire map, to be honest. From here on, it's really straightforward since we don't have to deal with the fog anymore and we just need to get to Lonato before Catherine can. Before we can do that, we get hit by our first enemy gambit of the run, which, well, when done a gazillion times, a 30% accurate hit is bound to land at some point. It doesn't deal any damage, but since it hits, it does immobilize Sylvain for one turn, so we need to wait an extra turn to be able to reach Lonato. The Lonato kill is kinda exciting because Sylvain gets his first crit of the run, finally, on a 2% chance even. It would be easier to land crits if he had access to Wrath, but we'll have to wait until I can get him to level 20 and master the warrior class to unlock that. For now, crits are kinda sacred. But that's it for the map. No hiccups at all so far. Now in Chapter 4, the mission for this month is the first time the Death Knight makes his appearance, so it's a little scary. Now's a good time to mention another goal for this run, killing the Death Knight in every chapter he appears in, as long as that doesn't get in the way of clearing the map. While I knew the Death Knight was coming, I wasn't particularly worried since the missions so far have been so easy. Honestly, famous last words because, spoiler alert, he was a real pain to deal with. But before we get into those details, the only notable developments this month is that we got Byleth's B support where Sylvain basically tells us that he hates us. Just kidding, not really. And Sylvain finally got his sword skill high enough to get Mercenary certification. Some grinding later, we get Vantage! Now we have the first half for those Vantage Wrath strats. But it'll still take a little bit to get the other half. It actually felt like getting to level 20 took ages while I was recording this. Now for the battle, at the start, I just get Sylvain to go through the middle of the map to cut a path straight towards the Death Knight, but we quickly have to revise that strategy because when I leave Sylvain in range of him, the Death Knight just comes up with a crit rolled and ready, so Sylvain just gets deleted instantly just on the second turn. So, after Divine Pulsing back, I take a detour through the left side of the map and have Sylvain make his way closer to the Death Knight that way. The chest on this side also has Spirit Dust, which was way more valuable than the intermediate seal in the chest on the right side. I also moved Byleth and Dimitri that way because on turn 7 there are 3 enemy reinforcements that spawn from where we start the battle. I just ignore the priest close to Byleth and Dimitri for now since he only has healing spells and focus on other enemies that are bigger threats. At this point, I try to take on the Death Knight again since we have access to the tiles that provide a +2 boost to defense, but it doesn't matter because the Death Knight still crits again. So I leave the Death Knight for now and clean up the other enemies left on the left side of the map. I move Byleth and Dimitri as far left as I can out of enemy range, and managed to get the reinforcements coming from the bottom of the map to go towards Sylvain, so we deal with those two. At this point, Sylvain is in range to initiate combat with the Death Knight, but I don't like the matchups we currently have against him and continue cleaning up the other enemies instead. I also started moving Sylvain and Byleth towards each other because I needed access to the convoy. I noticed that the axes that I put on Sylvain were all super heavy and caused the Death Knight to double him, so I thought maybe I could increase Sylvain's survivability in a Death Knight altercation with an iron axe that's less heavy and would hopefully prevent doubling. My idea was for Sylvain to take a hit or two from the Death Knight and then kill him after a few exchanges. Thankfully, that ends up working out. I'm honestly not sure why I tried this exchange while the Death Knight was on the avoid tile instead of drawing him out of it, but Sylvain miraculously doesn't miss any of his hits in the next 2 turns, thanks Lancebreaker, and we safely make it through defeating the Death Knight in this chapter. After a lot of work. I noticed that I still have a few turns left before the time limit, so I go to the right side to grind some more experience and get the intermediate seal. When the turns start dwindling down, I move Sylvain up towards the boss, but this causes the remaining enemies to target Byleth and Dimitri, so I have to do a little bit of kiting around. Thankfully, the boss for the battle is light work compared to the Death Knight, so we're able to deal with him in one turn with just one turn left. Starting chapter 5, we get Dimitri's B support combo, unlock the sauna so we get Sylvain straight in there for those instruction bonus points, and finally unlock the blacksmith to get some upgraded weapons. During this chapter, Sylvain gets to level 15, so here's the average Sylvain comparison for this level. Other than his speed and resistance, there's nothing too groundbreaking about our Sylvain's stats for this run, but having higher speed and magical defenses than normal is obviously great for a solo run. So the mission for this chapter is actually dealing with Sylvain's own older brother, Myclon, who's the leader of a bandit group that stole their family's hero's relic. What's scary about this battle is what happens after you kill Sylvain's crap of a brother, though. He turns into a monster the first time we encounter this type of enemy in the story. Dealing with just one monster isn't a big deal if you have access to multiple units. You can usually use 2 gambits to fully break the barrier and deal a lot of damage to the enemy with other characters once the barrier is down. But with just one unit, if the monster starts with a fully healthy barrier like Myclon does, it's impossible to fully break it with a single gambit, so the barrier just keeps recharging every turn. While we do get through this map, it takes a little while, so let's just get right into it. It actually took me 2 tries to complete this battle. The footage I'll be showing is the successful run, since also showing the previous failed run would take too long. I disabled the combat animations and skipped the enemy phases because there's a ton of enemies to get through in the first part of the battle, and I wanted to get to Myclon as fast as possible after a failed run. Dealing with the enemies on the path to Myclon is really simple, especially with Life Taker to heal back up after every enemy killed. While there are reinforcements on turn 2 that come in from where we started the map, it's pretty simple to slowly deal with them in the little hallway leading to the room where the chest is. We just leave Byleth in there and have Sylvain block the entrance. After that's done, we can keep on going without worrying about any other enemy reinforcements that could come after Byleth. We ignore the Armored Knight that drops the accuracy ring since it's a useless item for this run, and just continue on through the other path. At this point we get really close to Myclon. It's kind of funny because a ton of the enemies here drop healing items, which I guess is Insys telling us to get prepared for a real dicey boss battle. We're able to deal with Myclon in one turn with a Bolt Axe and Elm Splitter, so we quickly unlock the actual boss of the map. This phase of the map brings all the deployed units to Myclon regardless of where they are in the map, so we have to move Byleth out of range before throwing Sylvain in there. I also turned the battle animations back on since we're finally back to the part of the battle that really matters. So I get Sylvain to draw the archers first so we can get rid of them and their annoying poison strike from the get-go. After the archers are done, the monster ends up close to the defensive tile, so I get Sylvain straight there for extra protection during combat. I slowly whittle down the monster's first health bar with Sylvain's fire, which takes several turns since his magic stat is really nothing to write home about right now. We get a lot of lucky avoids, so it's pretty much smooth sailing for this part. Eventually we get to the second health bar, and I notice that I get Myclon low enough to finish that health bar with Swift Strikes, which is a terrible idea that I end up going through. I unlock the third and final health bar, but Sylvain is not less than half of his health, so I undo that stupid decision with Divine Pulse and continue whittling down the second health bar from the defensive tile. Eventually, we get to the final health bar with Sylvain pretty healthy, and the strategy really doesn't change from the past 2 health bars. We just continue slightly poking the monster each turn while hoping Sylvain dodges most of the attacks. It's really anticlimactic, but that's how we finally kill it. It just took 56 turns of tickling the monster with Sylvain's amazing talent in magic and some upgraded javelins. As we go into chapter 6, I take the time to contemplate that so far I've actually been avoiding using silver weapons. With Max Professor level unlocked, silver weapons were always available for purchase at the armory or through offerings in the pagan altar in the abyss, but I felt like it was cheap to use such powerful weapons so early on. I've also been avoiding using gambits. The first time I even used a gambit this run was actually on Monster My Clone last chapter, and even though all the battalions we get in previous files carry over from New Game Plus, I wasn't even using the best one I could for the same reason as the silver weapons. As we've all seen now, it was extremely tedious just tickling the monster's HP down turn by turn, and I felt like if I continued this way, I'd go crazy before I even made it to the final chapter for the Academy phase. So for Chapter 6, I made sure to stock up on silver weapons and let myself use gambits if I had to. For exploration updates, I finally unlocked the Seed and Tea Leaf merchants. I could have unlocked them in the last chapter, but I ended up not doing any battles until the very last free day before the chapter mission last month, so they ended up only being available this month. Anyway, the key takeaway from unlocking these merchants is that I can start more reliably gardening for stat boosters and increasing Sylvain's charm through tea parties. So I plant some purple flower seeds to hopefully get the strength boosting item next time I do gardening, have some tea with Sylvain to make him more charming even though he's already perfect, and get his sea support with a net. Then we get our first paralogue of the run. In Chapter 6, we unlock Dedue's paralogue, and I decide to do it right away even though Dedue doesn't have access to a flying class yet. I thought I'd just try to do it now because as the months go by, there will be more and more paralogues unlocked, and I didn't want there to be a backlog of them since they're time sensitive. For this battle, we just have to kill the enemy boss before the Kingdom Army within 15 turns. We do get rewards based on how many Dusker soldiers we force to retreat in comparison to how many the Kingdom Army kills, but there's really nothing much we can do with a single unit. It's pretty straightforward, but it's a little hard for Sylvain to make his way toward the boss because he's still not high enough level to get Wyvern Rider certification. We just have to make him get down there as fast as possible because those turns rack up pretty fast when you only have one unit to cut a path to the boss. It's not too much trouble though because when we do get to the boss, we bypass his high avoid in the forest by going for a gambit to debuff him for the next turn, and just kill him in enemy phase when he attacks Sylvain. After that, the only thing of note before this month's mission is Ashe's B support, where Ashe just spits straight facts about Sylvain, but we can't have perfect hot guys without their flaws, so we get this. Anyway, moving on to the battle, this is the second time the Death Knight appears. I was actually really scared because he gave us such a hard time last time, but with better weapons and gambits at our disposal, I figured we'd be okay. Right from the get-go, I get Sylvain and Byleth to teleport to the halls to the right. Since this is a turn-limited map, we needed to move as fast as possible. While Sylvain dealt with all the enemies, I would use Byleth to do everything else, like turn on the warp tiles, open all the chests, and lastly, open the locked door leading to the Death Knight's room. I have to use a few divine pulses because I get some of the warp tiles confused, but it's okay since I didn't need to use the pulses for anything else. Other than the Death Knight boss, there wasn't anything to really worry about in this map. I was honestly really worried about the Death Knight since it was such a pain in Chapter 4. We were also running out of turns, so my anxiety levels were through the roof. All that worry was unnecessary though, because once I got Byleth to safely unlock the door to the room, when I simulated Sylvain's combat against the Death Knight, we had a guaranteed kill with Silverland's Swift Strikes. It was much more anticlimactic than I thought it would be, but at least we did it! Yay! With this, we get a crappy level 20 level up, so let me pull up the average stats for comparison. While our Sylvain's still doing really well in comparison, he's been getting real crappy level ups. If you compare his speed to the one he had at level 15, it's exactly the same. RNG has not been kind, but oh well, it's still workable. On to Chapter 7, now that Sylvain's finally level 20, he can get his warrior certification. Here we come, Vantage Wrath Strats! With Chapter 7, we get access to Sylvain's and Ingrid's paralogs, so let's go through Sylvain's first. It'll be the simplest since the only other forced deployment other than Sylvain himself is Byleth. For Sylvain's paralogue, you get rewards based on how many thieves you can prevent from escaping. But again, with only Sylvain to do all the work, that's a hopeless endeavor. I just had Sylvain target the thief with the speed wing, but any of the other thieves Sylvain was able to get was just a bonus. Either way, there's not much to say here. All the enemies are really simple to deal with. There were just a few hiccups with aggroing some enemies and then they ended up going after Byleth, so I had to use some divine pulses to undo that. Sylvain gets mad that we let so many thieves get away, but well, maybe you should have tried harder to kill them all. It's your mission anyway. Maybe if you trained more instead of flirting more, you wouldn't be crying about all the thieves you let get away. Anyway, the map just took some time because it's a route the enemy map, but the enemies themselves weren't a problem. Anyway, good job Sylvain, you cleared your own paralogue all on your own. I'm sure your dad's proud. Also, he masters Warrior and unlocks Wrath. Vantage Wrath strats incoming! We get his Hero's Relic as a reward for clearing the paralogue, yay! But to be honest, I don't end up using his relic much for the rest of the run. Relics are hard to repair since the smithing materials for them are so limited, and Sylvain was cheesing everything with Swift Strikes anyway, so the Lance of Ruin mostly sat collecting dust in the convoy. Then we get into Ingrid's paralogue, which I thought was going to be a real pain. Ingrid's paralogue is shared with Dorothea, so having to deal with that forced deployment was a little daunting. I'll preface this by saying that clearing this map took more than 40 minutes of real time, the footage being sped up for your convenience and my sanity. There's a ton of reinforcements throughout the map. First, there's the continuous thieves coming from the top right, at least until you can kill the priest on the defensive tile, but sadly, reinforcements don't stop there. The objective of the map is to either rout the enemy, not a great option for a solo run, or move Ingrid to the escape tiles in the bottom right of the map. The second option is of course the preferable one, but in a solo run where only Sylvain can enter combat, that's easier said than done. The first order of business is to kill that priest on the top right to stop the continuous stream of thieves every turn, but it's a little frustrating because I aggroed some enemies that would then go after Dorothea, so I'd have to keep going back and forth to kill them instead of just going on a straight path to the priest. Eventually, I reached the priest. No more annoying thieves every turn, yay! But this map is so generous with its enemy reinforcements. There are certain thresholds in your positioning on the map that spawns more of them. The specific triggers aren't outlined in any guide I was able to find, but it seems that once you pass the vertical half of the map with any unit, it causes reinforcements to come in from where we start the map. Then there are reinforcements when you get close to the escape point, so there's more to clean up there too before you can safely get Ingrid there. Other than the super annoying reinforcements, the map was straightforward. I just had to watch Dorothea's positioning, since keeping flying units like my Byleth and Ingrid safe was really easy thanks to all the lava tiles that the enemies couldn't reach. After we finally finish the map, we get Ingrid's relic, which much like Sylvain's is just going to gather dust in the convoy. After those paralogs, the only thing left for this chapter was this month's mission, the Battle of the Eagle and Lion, plus the deer I guess. All the students are super excited to show off the results of their training, but sadly for the Blue Lions, our strategy will be yeeting Sylvain into the enemy lines and praying. Thankfully, this battle is really straightforward. Excluding the two Pegasus Knights from the Black Eagles, the Eagles and the Deer prioritize beating each other up instead of coming after us. Without worrying about any reinforcements that could put Byleth or Dimitri in jeopardy, I mostly just leave them in a corner and throw Sylvain into the fray. After the middle of the map is mostly cleaned up, I decide to go after Claude first, since Edelgard is honestly kind of scary with a speedy, still completely healthy Petra around. Claude's entire class, other than a few archers, didn't survive the mid-map bloodbath, and since archers don't deal a ton of damage to Sylvain with his decent defense stat, it was safer to go this way first. Edelgard ended up not being so scary after all though. I don't know if I just forgot to turn on Swift Strikes against her since she'd kill Sylvain when she countered, but Sylvain ends up critting on the first hit so it doesn't end up mattering. At the end, just Petra is left. I wait for her to come to Sylvain because I was hoping to end the map with a Vantage Wrath animation, but she just gambits us, so we end up having to kill her on player phase anyway. But we did it, guys! And by we, I mean our resident womanizer. Good job, Sylvain. Now all the girls will love you for your coolness. Then we move on to Chapter 8. The first event of note here is Sothis Paralogue, which was one of the maps I was most worried about in this run. It starts with Byleth basically surrounded by monsters and separated from the rest of the army. I was really worried that I wouldn't be able to get Byleth out of range of the wolves fast enough, but with her reclassed to a flyer, it actually ends up being pretty simple. There are a lot of flying monsters, especially with those reinforcements that come in from the north, so I was worried that they would keep going after Byleth and Dimitri while Sylvain dealt with the others. But the hawks don't have that wide of a movement range, so I'm able to make them avoid the birds for quite a few turns. For this map, I finally allowed Sylvain to use the item from clearing the Ashen Wolves DLC, the Chalice of Beginnings, which mitigates bonus damage and allows counterattacks from any range. It's a broken item, but in a solo run with a more physical character against a gazillion monsters, I think these are reasonable grounds to use this. Anyway, it gets really dicey when Sylvain starts trading blows with the lizard because of the poison in its damage output. Thankfully, Sylvain's defense is high enough that he actually completely mitigates the normal attacks from the birds while on the grassy tile. And with some lucky dodges, he manages to survive with a lot of healing focuses in the middle of all those monsters. The victory condition for this battle is to defeat the commander, the big annoying poison lizard that has 3 health bars and a full barrier. As expected, it's not so simple to just kill it. I have to do quite a bit of kiting around when some of the birds end up targeting Byleth and Dimitri in the bottom right corner of the map. And then when it feels like everything is going to be okay, there are more stupid bird reinforcements! At that point, I realized that I need Sylvain to kill the lizard ASAP, so that's what I focus on for the rest of the battle. It takes a little while because the lizard deals so much damage each enemy face, so I keep having to use healing focus with Sylvain instead of attacking. It really gets down to the wire though. Eventually the reinforcement birds get in range of Byleth and Dimitri, and by that point Sylvain managed to whittle down the lizard low enough to be able to kill it with blessed land swift strikes. When I saw that it was actually possible to clear this map, I needed a little moment to breathe a huge sigh of relief. This map was so stressful, but we did it! For all this suffering, we get more divine pulse charges at least. Woohoo! After this, we get Sylvain's C support with Mercedes, and then we go straight to another Paralogue, this one being Felix's. The footage that I'll show here is actually the 3rd time I was going through this map. This Paralogue is a problem because Felix's father Rodrigue dies in like 4 to 5 turns in Maddening mode, and his defeat leads to a loss in this map. The first 2 times I tried this, I was trying to farm some experience and skill points, so predictably, Rodrigue just got oofed by the enemies while I was trying to do that. Thankfully, we just have to kill the enemy boss to clear the map, so just getting Sylvain to the top left corner of the map as fast as possible makes this battle pretty simple. While the enemy commander is an assassin, units that are super annoying with their high avoid and high speed preventing doubling, Sylvain is able to hit him pretty reliably with magic. We do get lucky with a Sagittae crit to end the map, but I'm still confident we would have cleared the map even without the crit since Ragnarok had 77% hit rate and it was powerful enough to 2-shot the assassin anyways. By scaring away the bandits, we're able to save most of the villagers, so we get a Wodao, yay! Speedrunning the map gave us some nice rewards. After this, we go straight to Remire village for this chapter's mission. This is another chapter where the Death Knight appears, so we'll keep an eye out for him so we can beat him up. Since the terrain here is filled with forests and buildings, it's in our best interest to keep Sylvain as a flyer for maximum mobility around the map. Until we unlock the true victory conditions for this map, we just focus on saving as many villagers as we can closest to the starting point. Eventually, after Thomas unmasks himself as Solon, we get our true objective, and the Death Knight appears. Since Sylvain is already in range, I think about just going straight for the Death Knight kill. However, that would leave Sylvain in range of taking bonus damage from the archer, and at this point, I unequipped the Chalice of Beginnings from Sylvain since I only used it exclusively against the monsters in the Sothis Paralogue. So instead I go for the archer using a ranged gambit first. Unfortunately, the Death Knight ends his turn in the forest, so his avoid gets super high. So I wait another turn for him to get out of the forest. After I unlock the chest, I end up leaving Dimitri in range of some reinforcements I didn't know were going to spawn, so I have to redo that turn anyways. Twice before I just decide to put Dimitri in a corner away from everything because a horse layer isn't even worth it when I can just buy it at the armory. After all that though, it's really easy to deal with the Death Knight at this point in the game thanks to the Swift Strikes cheese as usual. I think the way I was positioning Sylvain was confusing the enemy AI because they all did a U-turn and started going the opposite way from where they initially went. Which works just fine for me since I'm able to save the last remaining villager before finally targeting Solon and one-turning him with, you guessed it, more Swift Strikes cheese! With a horse slayer for some reason. Maybe I was BMing Solon by indirectly calling him a horse or something. And with that, we were able to save half of the villagers with only Sylvain. Not too bad, I think. Good job, Sylvain. Onto the first double-digit chapter, we get Sylvain's final support with Annette, and then attempt Ashe's Paralogue, which is shared with Catherine. Sadly, this is the first Paralogue we fail in the solo. This map's victory condition is to either rout the enemy, which is impossible with only a single unit to depend on, or protect Rhea for 10 turns, which you may also think is impossible with only one unit to enter combat with. Well, you're completely right. This is indeed impossible. Rhea just gets oofed in like 4 turns because there's no way to protect her with only Sylvain, sadly. I did try this map about 3 times before finally giving up on it. Since the rewards for this Paralogue were so good, namely the Shoes of the Wind, I considered trying to clear it by normal means with a full army and a ton of gambits, but it would be unfair to complete the Paralogue without respecting the rules of the solo run. Ultimately, I decided to let it go, as tragic as it was. But with this, we finally got the first failure of the solo run, being unable to complete all the Blue Lion's Paralogues. I'll still try to clear the remaining ones, but the fact remains that this specific goal is crossed off as a failure. But jumping from that Paralogue failure, we tried to succeed on another one! Since Flayn is technically part of the Blue Lions, now we set out to complete her Paralogue that's shared with Seth. At this point in the run, I'm letting Sylvain use the Chalice of Beginnings due to all the advanced class enemies running about now. I let him use all the DLC stat boosting items, so I thought I might as well just let him use the Chalice too. Anyway, this map is basically just a huge movement hindering terrain for infantry units, so it's actually really easy to deal with. The enemies don't have a large attack range since their movement is so gimped, other than the mages that can keep their normal movement, so keeping all the others out of harm's way while sending Sylvain to clean up all the enemies is a walk in the park. Or a wyvern right in the beach, hehehehe, sorry. Sometimes Sylvain got really low since I was playing around with Wrath and Vantage, but with Divine Pulses as a safety net and dismounting on some healing tiles, there wasn't anything particularly alarming to worry about. That's all I have to say regarding this map. It was a super simple cleanup mission for this solo. Oh, but Sylvain did get to level 25 during this battle, so here's the comparison to an average playthrough Sylvain. Our Sylvain's strength is crazy high thanks to all the gardening for strength boosting items we've been doing. His defensive stat line, both physically and magically, is significantly higher as well, which is great since he's going to be taking even stronger hits later in the run. Overall, his stats are great, mostly because of all the items we've been using on him since a lot of his level ups have been trash. Anyway, after that, I then went on to try Yuri and Constance's Paralogue since at this very late point in the run, I decided to switch over my dancer choice to Yuri because I was scared that Felix didn't have enough charm to beat the White Huron Cup. Sadly, this Paralogue is also impossible because it's a protect ally type of map like Ashe's. Not only that, whenever enemy units get adjacent to the guy we have to babysit, they transform into monsters. And the fun of monsters never ends because with only Sylvain to do the heavy lifting, we can't kill those units fast enough before they reach the green unit. It was really unfortunate because I really wanted Yuri's relic since it would give him increased movement range and Canto for repositioning after dancing, but oh well. Sylvain gets his B support with Mercedes, then he shows up at the Goddess Tower despite me forgetting to talk to the Gatekeeper to guarantee him as the encounter for that scene. I mean, it's his solo, so naturally we should get a romantic encounter with him at the Goddess Tower. Thankfully, Sylvain was automatically set as the encounter since it seems we had the most support points with him. Understandably. After all those shenanigans, we finally get to this month's main mission, beating up a bunch of monsters and saving as many students as we can while babysitting Geralt. This is where our dancer Yuri makes his debut, and only appearance in the entire run, and where that rule about allowing a unit other than Sylvain to heal green ally units comes from. One of the defeat conditions is Geralt getting oofed, so we have to babysit him with Yuri healing him basically every single turn, or we just lose the map because that old man is so eager to get killed. I tried to prioritize the students in the beginning, but that left Geralt alone in the center of the map with two monsters targeting him. In Maddening mode, Geralt doesn't last very long, so I had to revise the game plan and have Sylvain be Geralt's bodyguard while we just let the two students at the top of the map die. Sorry kids. After we just give up on saving the students, the map becomes pretty simple. It was just stressful because Geralt got so low so many times, and Yuri's heal isn't the best since his magic is pretty low. The map took a while because I used Divine Pulses to go back super far to redo all the oopsies with Geralt, but at least there was no need for a hard reset. But yay, good job Sylvain and Yuri! Too bad the game just wanted us to keep Geralt alive so he could get oofed in the cutscene after the battle by Mach and Kronya. All that hard work for nothing. As we continue into Chapter 10, now fatherless, with a depressed Byleth and equally depressing monastery music, I'll take the time to mention that I decided to recruit two students from other houses in this chapter, since at this point they come pre-leveled at 19, so we don't have to waste too much time leveling them up so they can become part of our flying club. The two students I recruited here were Lorenz for his Paralogue rewards and Caspar since we need him to unlock Mercedes' Paralogue after the time skip. Now we can go straight into our ex-Golden Deer student's Paralogue. Lorenz's Paralogue is really simple since we can just go straight for the boss to end the map. Thanks Sothis because we all know what would have happened if the only victory condition was that second part. This battle barely lasted 4 minutes of real time, there's really nothing much to say here. I just got Sylvain to fly up to Acheron and then beat him up in a single turn. It's nice to have a simple mission for once though. The real highlight here is that we get Lorenz's relic, which adds +2 to magic attack range, which will be really nice once we can get Sylvain to a mounted magic class. Cries in no flying magic class for males. After we beat up that poor little man in less than 5 minutes, we relax by fishing a weird glowy creature that we can make into a nice temporary stat booster dish. Then we proceed to this month's mission. This map is a defeat the commander type of map, which usually makes for a simple map in a solo run. We just go straight for Kronya from the get-go and manage to kill her with quite a bit of luck because I forgot to put Swordbreaker and Lance Prowess on Sylvain for this map. What makes this map scary is that there's a phase 2. After killing Kronya, we unlock the true boss Solon that shows up at the defensive tile further north on the map. That's all fine and all, but the problem is that after the mid-battle cutscene, which I skipped for your convenience because it's very long, Byleth gets repositioned to the middle of the map for plot reasons, which is a huge issue when we can't clean up the other enemies left on the map with just Sylvain. I was worried I wouldn't be able to keep Byleth out of harm's way when we triggered the second phase of the map, but I'm just able to get Byleth out of enemy range. After we ensure Byleth's safety, I just fly Sylvain over to Solon as fast as possible with some lucky dodges against the monsters during enemy phase, and just one-turn him. He was way easier to deal with than Kronya, so it was a very anticlimactic end to the map. After Sylvain carries out our revenge for us, we get some real lap pillow before moving on to the next chapter, the second last one for this part of the run. From this point on, all we have left are the month's missions, so we can just get straight to it, stopping the Flame Emperor's forces from plundering the Holy Tomb. This one is also a defeat the commander type of map like the last mission, but thankfully there are no mid-battle repositioning shenanigans. I make sure to place Sylvain as far forward as I can in the pre-battle preparation since we need to get him to the Flame Emperor as fast as we can. It's a race against time because the armored knights near the top are going straight for Byleth. Thankfully, we were able to get to the Flame Emperor really quick, and I tried a few different ways of approaching combat against them. Ultimately, I end up having to get Sylvain to poke the Flame Emperor with a ranged gambit so I could reposition Sylvain out of the range for the enemy phase. After that, the Flame Emperor's HP drops down low enough that Sylvain can kill them in the next player phase and the map is done. Then we get the big reveal. We just beat up Edelgard! And Dimitri goes a little bit cuckoo. But we cleared the map and that's what matters. Then we finally get to the last chapter of the first part of the game. While there's not terribly much to do before the mission, we actually managed to get Sylvain to level 30 by grinding some battles. Let me pull up the comparison to an average run Sylvain. Unsurprisingly, our Sylvain is still doing much better in all accounts thanks to all the stat boosters we've been investing in him from all the drops we get from enemies and chests and gardening. I've been particularly investing in his strength and speed, and while it may look like I've been investing in his resistance, that's just from all the white Veronas that so many enemies drop for some reason. His charm is of course super high thanks to all the tea parties we've been having throughout the entire run. I wish his defense matched his resistance, but it is what it is when I mostly relied on Sylvain's base 40% defense growth rate. All in all though, his stats are pretty nice going into the final chapter of the Academy phase. We just do some final class certifications before the mission by getting Sylvain to Wyvern Lord and Byleth to Dark Flyer for that extra flying movement range, then we go to the final battle of this part of the run. Just like the last few maps, we just have to kill the boss to beat this battle. The strat, as usual, is to start the battle with Sylvain positioned on the farthest up front tile so he can go beat up Edelgard as fast as possible. As the map goes on, flying enemies close in on the top of the map, so we really feel the pressure to end this as fast as possible. While this is also a map where the Death Knight shows up, we have to ignore him since we don't have the time to rumble with him. Thankfully, we can just take Sylvain basically down on a straight line to Edelgard and go in from the left side where there are no enemies to be her meat shield. In the end, killing her is pretty simple because I realized she has 0 hit rate when we get Sylvain to attack her with a sword, and we even managed to get a lucky crit on her to just one-turn her. This entire battle took less than 10 minutes of real time, and it was pretty anticlimactic for the last battle of the run. But we did it! Some of the side goals I set for myself ended up unfulfilled, like completing all the Blue Lions paralogs because some of them were actually impossible to solo, and defeating the Death Knight in every chapter, though we did kill him in all of them except for the final one. Despite all of that though, we did complete the main point of this run. We managed to beat the Academy phase in Fire Emblem 3 Houses on Maddening with only Sylvain. Thank you for watching! This part of the run will be ending here, but there's so much to come from Sylvain. If you'd like to stay updated when we continue this solo run in Azure Moon, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that bell icon. Bye for now!